You know that feeling where you hear that something's gonna happen and you get really excited because you love that thing that's gonna happen, but at the same time, you know that thing that's gonna happen is gonna break your heart, so you're kind of sad at the same time, and it's just like a big mess of feelings. Yeah, it's a real thing. Hi everybody, Carla here, and this week, the biggest news of the week, at least as far as I am concerned, was that there is a new Little Women movie coming. Yes, Greta Gerwig, who was nominated for directing Lady Bird just last year at the Oscars, her next project is going to be an adaptation of Little Women, and she's already rounding up the cast, and it looks amazing. I'm so excited. Not only is she directing, which I'm super happy about because she's quality, but also she's going to cast, and you may want to sit down for this because it's a big deal. She's going to cast Meryl Streep as Marmee, Emma Stone as Meg, Saoirse Ronan as Jo, and Timothée Chalamet as Laurie. I'm not crying, you're crying. It's like I have never heard such a great cast in my entire life. It's like I get chills just thinking about it. It's so awesome, and because I'm so excited about this movie, I can't wait to see what she does with it. I'm so excited that I decided I have to talk about Little Women this week. That's what I'm gonna do. Hopefully this will be a short video, but I can't assure you of that because I have feelings about this book. It's my favorite book of all time. The movies have been great. The miniseries at the BBC that I said I would talk about and I never did, it was also great. I loved it, and I have so many feelings about this. Okay, I have so many feelings about this book, but more specifically, I have many feelings about the ending of this book. And if you haven't read Little Women, or if you haven't watched any of the movies or the miniseries, number one, what the hell are you doing with your life? Go fix that right now, please. And number two, there may be spoilers because I will cry about the ending of this book, which is the greatest tragedy of my life, basically, as far as shipping is concerned. So don't say I didn't warn you. Today I am talking about Jo and Laurie and their relationship and why it affects me so much.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger! No, Will Robinson! Danger!
So when I was watching the BBC, when I was waiting for the BBC miniseries to be released, they kept putting out, like PBS Masterpiece kept putting out little, featurettes with the cast talking about their characters and what they went through and blah blah blah, and they kept putting them out on Twitter, and I kept getting all hyped because I really love these actresses and actors, and I was really looking forward to this miniseries, right? And I loved everything they said for the most part. Like, I felt they really get their characters and everything. There was one little featurette that made me pause, and it was about Jo and Laurie. And in that featurette, I believe the writer of the miniseries, so the person who adapted the book into a miniseries, I believe it was her, she says, because they were trying to explain why Jo and Laurie are such a big deal to people, and yet they don't end up together in the book, and why this hurts so many people. These are my people, guys. They were trying to explain that, and then the writer of the miniseries comes in and says, well, it's basically because every girl wants to be Jo, and every girl wants to be with Laurie, basically. And to be honest, I am kind of offended by that notion. A little bit, yeah. True, it's true that a lot of us who read Little Women identify with Jo. There's a specific subset of women who are very much like Joe. That's why the book has been so enduring, because you feel you can identify with at least one of these women. And you know, if you're reading Victorian books at 9 years old, it's probably gonna be Joe. I'm just saying. So yeah, I definitely identify with Joe. I wanted to be Joe when I grew up. I still do. I think she's my favorite fictional character, maybe of all time ever. She's the character that I feel the closest to. I really relate to her. And I take offense at the idea that my desires for Joe's love life are somehow some kind of wish fulfillment, and that's it. I read this book when I was 9 years old. I have read it over 40 times in my lifetime. I love this book to death. It's my favorite book of all time. I love Joe. I wanted to be Joe. I identify with Joe so much that it feels reductive to me to just say, oh, it's some kind of wish fulfillment because everybody wants Laurie. Sure, I would love to have a Laurie of my own. I love Laurie. He's so great. That's not why I want him to be with Joe. I want him to be with Joe because I think that Joe loved him. And I think for many different reasons, she just wasn't ready for it. The timing was off. She was scared. And that's why it didn't happen. And it hurts my heart that it didn't happen. But I understand why it didn't happen. You know? And it's very reductive to me. I don't think of shipping as some kind of wish fulfillment. You ship people because you ship fictional characters who aren't actual real people. But you ship fictional characters because you think they're compatible. You think they have chemistry. You saw something in there between the two of them that you liked. That's why you ship things. And I think it's very reductive to say it's always some kind of wish fulfillment, especially in the case of Joe and Laurie, who were basically, if not the first, then one of the first ships I had in my life, and endures to this day, like 30 years later. And it feels very reductive to me. So, you know, I'm not like getting super angry at it or anything. I understand why she would feel that way. But it does sting a little bit that people think it's just, oh, you want a Laurie of your own, so of course you're gonna ship her with him. No. If so, I would be Amy. I'm not Amy. I'm Joe. I'm more of a Joe. That's what it is. And it's just okay. Let's go step by step. When I don't know how many of you know this, but it's a very widely known story, but in case you didn't know, back then when Louisa May Alcott actually wrote Little Women, she published it in parts, right? So the first part was the first half of the book, and the second part with, you know, the marriages and everything, it was the second half of the book. So when she published the first half, she actually got letters from her readers asking her to put Joe and Laurie together. It's like maybe the oldest instance of shipping, of fandom shipping that we know of, basically. But she actually got like tons and tons of letters from readers to actually get Laurie and Joe together. And she hated it. She did not want to do that at all. She didn't want Laurie and Joe to end up together because she was trying to prove a point about the general consensus of rules about relationship in her time. And in Victorian times, it was very common, you know, that the woman would sort of marry the best prospect out there, a person who was from a decent family, who had good manners, who had money, and the woman would try to sort of marry as well as possible within those rules. You know, if you could get someone who was really rich and also really good looking and really nice, that was sort of the epitome of everything, right? So Louisa May Alcott felt that her readers wanting Joe and Laurie to end up together was because of that sort of general train of thought, you know? Laurie cares about Joe. Laurie is a nice person. He has good manners. He's really freaking rich. So Louisa May Alcott felt that her readers wanted Joe to end up with Laurie because he was the best prospect. And I understand why she did that. In essence, it was actually a very feminist sort of decision on her part. And I love the book because of that. It's something that in her time you wouldn't see. People didn't just marry for love, and that's one of the big lessons of Little Women. In fact, that you should marry someone because you love them, not because they have money, not because they can give you a comfortable life. I understand why she did it, and instead she chose for Joe. I mean, I wouldn't have done it that way. I probably would have just made her a spinster or something. But she chose for Joe to fall in love with someone who didn't have as much money but was equally good to her, you know, and she loved him. So she chose that for Joe instead. That's the thing about what Louisa did, is that I think in trying to avoid one pitfall of her time, she sort of fell into another pitfall of her time. A little bit. And it's this idea that people have to be like agreeable to each other, or in more modern worlds they have to be compatible. They have to have interests in common, otherwise they're just gonna be bored forever and they're going to grow to resent each other and their marriage would be hell on earth. Remember, back then they didn't have TV, they didn't have really a lot of entertainment, so you basically had to spend 24/7 with your significant other talking, basically. So of course being agreeable to each other was kind of a thing that women were looking for. Sure, you want the guy who has the most money, but if he's a dick, you don't want to be with him. If he's boring, you don't want to be with him. So that is kind of another side of the coin of the Victorian era train of thought that I feel Louisa May Alcott fell into. And I don't blame her for it. In those times when there was no sort of possible idea that two people who were married didn't necessarily have to spend every waking hour of their day together, that they could take time for themselves and do other things. Back then that wasn't a thing. So I understand why she did it, why she chose to give Joe a husband, a partner in life who actually shared some interests with her, who she could talk to for, you know, about topics that she was interested in for hours, etc. I understand. I have nothing against Friedrich. I think he's really great. Maybe he was a little bit pushy with the whole thing with Joe's, you know, manuscript and everything, and her writing. He was a little bit pushy about that, but I feel like he learned his lesson, you know, and he has to just let Joe be who she is. Maybe try to challenge her a little, but not in the way that he did it originally. And I mean, he could be a little bit snobbish about it, so that did bother me. But I think he learned his lesson on that, and he learned to be supportive of her and her writing, basically no matter what she wanted to write, right? So I have nothing against Friedrich. I love him. I think he's super sweet. I love their kids. Not as many people have read the Little Women sequels, but there are Little Women sequels, Joe's Little Boys and Joe's Boys, and I love the sequels. Joe's Boys is pretty high up there for me as well. Almost not as much as Little Women, but I think Joe's Boys is my second favorite of the series. I love it. I love the characters. I love their kids. I totally respect Joe's relationship with Friedrich. I think it was sweet in its own way. But what I don't like about that standard of you have to be agreeable to each other is that it implies that Joe and Laurie were not agreeable to each other, which to me is kind of insane. And it's not, I shouldn't say that, it's not insane, but it's kind of unthinkable to me, because I've read all three of these books and they seem to agree more often than not. Sure, I mean, they do have their disagreements, and of course Laurie's not some kind of scholar or anything, but he's educated. He went to college. He's a businessman. So, like, this idea that Laurie's somehow not smart enough to hold a conversation with Joe about stuff that she likes, I find really, really awkward and just not comporting to the reality that I read in the books. You know, he's a smart dude. He would do anything for Joe, and if she wants to talk about something that he hasn't read about, he would probably go and read it. You know, he loves her that much. And I feel like saying that you can only love someone if they share your exact same interests is shortchanging a relationship. And again, I don't blame Alcott for doing it. It was the way things were in her time. But looking at it from a modern perspective, we are shown to appreciate our differences as much as we appreciate our similarities. And sure, you can't be with someone who is your complete opposite. That would be sort of disastrous. But there is some grain of truth in the idea that opposites attract and that people complement each other. And what one of them has, the other one doesn't. And so they help each other in that manner. And I think that's a very modern concept that was just escaping Louisa May Alcott because of her time. And I think, attributing that concept to our reading of the book nowadays seems very counterproductive to me. I don't believe the idea that you have to share the exact same interests in order to love someone. And I don't think that very many people this day and age actually do think that way. We have been shown to appreciate the differences as much as the similarities. And of course you need to have some kind of common interests as well, but it's not the end all be all. It's not what makes or breaks a relationship necessarily. Relationships have been shown to work even though people don't agree 100% of the time, even though there's fights. Nowadays we all know that, when you get together with someone, there's going to be fights. It's a given. No relationship is perfect, and that's the thing. Back then, fighting with your husband was like, no. It's like, oh no, you're disagreeable to each other. Your relationship is going to be strained forever. Now we know that that's not the truth. That's not what relationships really are like in this day and age. And I feel most of us who still feel for Joe and Laurie, even though they don't end up together in the book, most of us modern readers sort of feel that way because of that. Also, I do have to say that Alcott does sort of fall into the pitfalls of writing. She sort of breaks the number one rule, and the number one rule is show, don't tell. Right? That's the guiding star for writers everywhere. And I feel that Louisa May Alcott sort of fails that one rule in this instance a little bit. That's, again, I'm not saying that there's a problem with Alcott or anything. I love her. Little Women is my favorite book of all time. I love her writing. But in this one case, I would have to say that she failed to show us instead of telling us, because there are many instances where it's mentioned later on when, after the proposal and when their relationship is strained. There are many instances in which it's shown, like, for example, Marmee being like, yeah, I was hoping you would say no to him because I don't think you two would be good together because you would be fighting all the time, basically. That's basically what it boils down to. And it's kind of funny because up until that point, Joe and Laurie haven't really fought all that much. So all we get as readers is this idea that they're great friends, that they have fun together. That they love each other at least as friends, right? And that they have a great relationship. We haven't really seen them fight all that much. Sure, they tease each other every once in a while, but it's nothing that seems like it offends either of them. So all of a sudden, Laurie proposes and Joe says no, and then everybody's like, Joe, you did the right thing. You guys would totally be tearing each other's hair off. If you guys got married, it would be terrible. And I'm like, what? When did this happen? It feels so weird to me that suddenly everybody's like, yeah, you would butt heads all the time. And I'm like, but they don't. that's not a thing. It only starts to happen when he proposes, and then of course they're strained because Joe turns him down, and all of a sudden we're hearing about all these disagreements that they had that we never saw, and it's really, really awkward for me. And that's basically what the characters in universe sort of hold on to, this idea that Joe and Laurie would just argue too much. And in our day and age, in modern times, we understand that couples are going to argue. That's not the point. What really matters is that even though they argue, even though they disagree, they love each other, and their love supersedes any argument that they have amongst themselves. That's how you know that a relationship is going to last. Of course, it doesn't happen with every relationship. Some couples just cannot get along and end up breaking up. But I would like to think that Joe and Laurie loved each other enough that they would not be one of those couples, that they would argue like every normal couple does, but their love would supersede all of that, because it has, even in the book it did. They were friends overall, even though they argued, even though they disagreed. And when they were just friends, we didn't really see them disagree all that much. So I think this point is sort of very, very vague and introduced in universe. Like, we're told in universe that it has happened, but we never actually see it until they actually start fighting about the proposal. And it makes me a little bit mad, to be honest, because I feel that Louisa failed the show don't tell rule, and because of that, things didn't work out. Because Jo somehow convinced herself that because they fight too much, which we never saw, because they fight too much, they're not agreeable to each other, they're not compatible as a couple, and therefore they shouldn't marry. And everybody else around them seems to be exactly agreeing with that, for no reason at all. Most of all, though, I think nowadays we have a different view of what marriage is like. I think for everybody in the world right now, it is the ultimate goal to be married to your best friend. To be married to that one person that you always want to speak to, that one person that you can always have fun with. That's sort of the ultimate goal of marriage for us right now. It's just, you take someone who's been your friend and make it more, because you realize that you care about them as more than just a friend, but they're your friend. They're the person that you are lucky enough to spend the rest of your life with. Back in Victorian days, it wasn't like that. Marriage was supposed to be different from your friends. You know, it was supposed to be separate from your friends. It wasn't a friendship plus, it was just a relationship, and it was different. And I feel like Little Women hammers down that point a lot, but it only does so in the case of Jo, honestly, because I would say that Meg and Brooke, for example, they were pretty good friends before they got married. And yeah, she married him because despite the fact that he had no money, and they were happy, but that's the thing, they were friends, they were partners. And I feel like the Meg and Brooke relationship is a lot more representative of what relationships are to us nowadays. Whereas with the Jo and Laurie thing, there's so much thinking about it, of thinking whether they're compatible or not, and whether they'll be happy or not, and whether they'll argue or not. There's so much thinking about it that it's no wonder that Jo psychs herself up. Because that's the thing. I don't ship them because I consider myself like Jo and I want a Laurie of my own. I ship them because I thought they had good chemistry. I thought they had fun together. I thought they were always each other's first go-to. And I think that Jo loved him. Because I identify so much with Jo in both the good things and the bad things, I know, because I am like that love is a big deal. You know, I am like that too. I don't tell someone I love them lightly. It's very very important. It's a big, big deal, and it should be treated like a big deal. And I think Jo is scared of change. Really scared of change. And I know that because I am like that too. She's very scared of change. And she's very scared of losing the people she cares about. So not just change in general, but people leaving her, basically. She freaks out when Meg starts to get together with Brooke. And for her, it takes some time for her to understand that just because people are moving on with their lives, it doesn't mean that they're leaving her. But she's deathly afraid of that. And she's deathly afraid that starting a relationship with Laurie, like marrying Laurie, will change things between them, and that she will lose him because of that. Because of her temper. Because of her reactions to things. She thinks that if they're together, their disagreements will matter even more, and will hurt even more, and would lead to her resenting him, or him resenting her, and the relationship being strained, and she doesn't want that. But that's the thing. I think she's afraid of all these things because she knows she feels something for him. And that's something that I read in between the lines in the book. And I think that's something that many women read in between the lines of the book. But Jo is scared, and in not giving Laurie that chance, she basically gives in to her fear. And that's, I think, the part that hurts me the most. Because, like Jo, I want to find someone. But it's scary. It's freaking scary. You know, falling in love is a big deal. And I feel like she had what everybody is looking for right in front of her. And she couldn't take it because she was scared. And after that, it's kind of a question of timing, I think, because by the time that she goes to New York, and I do think that she needed to go to New York, because New York was basically what got her out of that fear, out of that box that she had shut herself into. She needed to know that she could live a life on her own, that she didn't need the people she cared about to be around her all the time, that she could do it on her own. She needed that. I think she needed to go to New York, but that's the thing. After New York, and after Laurie goes to Europe, then they both, you know, become enamored with other people, and the timing is just terribly wrong. And I think that sucks, but it's, you know, even though I hate the fact that they didn't end up together, I don't necessarily blame Louisa May Alcott, because I think the fact that timing sucks is another fact of life that actually happens. And Jo and Laurie not ending up together is always gonna hurt me, but life is like that. That's the thing. And so I can't be too negative. I will always cry over Jo and Laurie, but I think the timing wasn't right, and that's a lesson that we should also learn. So I think for them it was a question of timing. I think it's just really funny though, because there are so many things in Louisa May Alcott's story, including the story of Jo and Laurie, that I agree with. Like, intellectually, I know that it's better that things are this way, but emotionally speaking, I can never distance myself from that feeling of heartbreak I got from Laurie and Jo not ending up together. So, like, for example, I think because the timing wasn't right, the whole proposal thing, Jo wasn't ready for it. She wasn't ready to get married. She needed to go to New York in order to learn that she was a woman on her own, that she could do things on her own. And she had to go to New York to learn that lesson. So if she had said yes to Laurie the first time around, she would have always had that in the back of her mind. You know, like, did I just settle? Did I not do everything that I wanted to do before I got married? And that's why I like that she turned him down. I like it. It was such a feminist move for someone of her time. Like, women did not turn down proposals. It wasn't a thing. And especially not from someone who was so great as Laurie, who was a great prospect as Laurie, like I was saying. Like, he has everything. He's handsome, he's charming, he's nice, he cares about her, he has money. So the idea that Joe turned him down is kind of unbelievable, and I applaud Alcott for that. I think it was the right thing to do. I just wish they had come back together later on. But the thing is, I like so many things about that proposal. I like that she turned him down. I like that when she turned him down, Laurie said, "Okay, I'll back off," because you don't see enough. You don't see enough of that in literature, even in modern day. It's this idea that a man can just keep insisting despite the fact that the woman says, "No, I'm sorry, it's not gonna happen." I like that Joe said no, and I like that Laurie just said, "Okay, that's your decision, I'm good with it." I wish they had reconnected later on, but then Amy came along, and then Friedrich came along, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, I really love it. I really wanna highlight the good things about it. I just wish it hadn't been this way necessarily. Like I said, I don't mind the relationship between Joe and Friedrich at all. I like them. I like Friedrich. I like their kids. Amy, she gets better. Let's just put it this way. She starts off as a really annoying little kid, but she does get better, and I love Bess. She's adorable. I like the relationship she has with Laurie, but we don't see enough of it for me to be like, okay, I can ship them now. With Joe and Friedrich, it's a little bit better because we get to see a little bit of their relationship in more depth. And I can see why she would feel attracted to him and why she would fall in love with him. Not quite the same with Amy and Laurie, but Amy at least got better. I love Bess. She's the cutest, and it's not that I am like super salty about it or anything, except emotionally speaking, I will always want Joe and Laurie to end up together. I will always rewatch the book and rewatch the movies and the miniseries and cross my fingers and hope, please let it be the time when the author or the director or whoever decides to part ways with the book just a little bit and give me that. It never happens, and I'm pretty sure that it won't happen with Greta Gerwig either, but I love Little Women. I love that story. I love Joe and Laurie as characters independent of each other. I just think they would have been better off together by my standards, by modern standards. I think if you take this story and put it in a modern setting, inevitably there's bound to be some difference between the two of them and their relationship, because they were so constrained by the mode of thought of their time, and Alcott was so constrained by the mode of thought of her time, that I think maybe seeing it from a modern perspective would make a difference. I don't know, I've heard that there's a few books that kind of attempt to do the Little Women thing from a modern perspective. I know that The Spring Girls by Anna Todd is sort of a modern retelling of Little Women. I haven't read it yet. I don't know if the ending is any different, but I wish that someday someone will take the chance of maybe deviating a little bit from the book and giving us something different in respect to Joe and Laurie. I don't expect Greta Gerwig to do that, and I expect a lot of people will be put off by it, because I think nowadays even though I'm entirely sure that at least 80% of Little Women fans out there are on board with the Joe and Laurie thing, like it's a big deal. I know for people, like if you tell any Little Women fan what's your greatest disappointment, they would tell you it's probably that Joe and Laurie didn't end up together. I know I'm not the only one. I think most people think like I do. But I think we put faithfulness to the original book over our own desires with Joe and Laurie. So I think if somebody outright changes that, people will still react like, okay, maybe dial it back a little because this is not what Alcott intended. So I'm not entirely sure that it will ever happen, but I would like to see what it would be like. Especially just this idea of how Joe would adjust to a relationship with Laurie from being friends without always being scared that something would go wrong, without, always being scared that she would be dependent on a man, especially since Laurie's rich and everything, that she would be dependent on a man to give her a livelihood, to give her a way of life. I think there are ways to do that, and I always have fanfiction when it comes down to it, but I did have to talk about this a little bit because Joe and Laurie were, and I tell people this all the time, they were the greatest heartbreak of my life. I was 9 when I first read the book, and to this day I still feel exactly the same feelings when I read the book now and when I watch the movies and TV shows. Just this idea that they never ended up together, always, it will always hurt me. But, I love Little Women. It's my favorite book of all time. I adore watching the movies and the miniseries. I think they're great. And part of me wouldn't change a thing, but part of me wishes, maybe if Victorian era writing hadn't been what it was, and maybe if we could capture a similar progression in our relationship from our modern day point of view, maybe things would have been different. I can't help but feel that. And part of me is crossing my fingers that Greta Gerwig has at least something new to show us, even if she doesn't outright change the ending. So I'm excited for her upcoming adaptation. The cast sounds amazing. I can't even, okay, just give Meryl Streep her Oscar right now. That's it. Just let her have it. I don't need to see the movie to know that she's gonna win an Oscar for it. And Saoirse Ronan is long overdue for an Oscar too, by the way. So, just give it to them. Winona Ryder and Susan Sarandon got nominated for Oscars the year that their Little Women adaptation came out in 1994. So, I have no doubt whatsoever that Meryl Streep is getting nominated for an Oscar, and Saoirse Ronan very well might be too. Emma Stone just won her Oscar, so of course, this cast is such a freaking thing. It's so amazing. I get chills just thinking about it, so I can't wait to see it. I hope Greta Gerwig does an amazing job. I know people are complaining that she should have been doing something original or whatever. I don't care. I love Little Women. I love Greta Gerwig. I love that cast. I can't wait to see this. I'm so excited. So, yeah, that's it. Why don't you guys tell me what you think? Have you read Little Women? Have you seen the movies? What do you think about Joe and Laurie? Let me know if you are like me, who wanted to see them get together, or if you are maybe a Laurie and Amy shipper or a Joe and Friedrich shipper, and you think the ending that we got was the right one. That's good as well. I like the ending. It hurts, but I liked it, so I understand for the most part why you guys would feel that way. So yeah, sure. Let me know in a comment, and while you're down there, if you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you like my stuff, please subscribe to my channel. I'm always happy to see people liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. It really does help me a lot with the YouTube algorithms, Any bit of help I can get is good. If you have any ideas for topics that you'd like me to talk about, just go into the comments and let me know. If it's anything that I know, anything that I have any knowledge about, I will make sure to add it to my list of videos to make them in the future. In the meantime, you can find me on social media gushing about the upcoming Little Women adaptation on Twitter and Instagram at girlsareweird with underscores between the words, and on Tumblr at girlsareweird with hyphens between the words. You can find a Facebook page for this vlog at facebook.com/FreakingNarnia, and as usual, you can visit my main website at FreakingNarnia.com. All my videos are up there in case you missed any and want to catch up. Just go in there, they're all up there and you can watch them. Also remember that I have a Redbubble store where I make art based on my favorite quotes from my favorite fandoms, and then you can use that art to print on different types of merchandise such as t-shirts, coffee cups, computer covers, all sorts of cool, neat stuff in there. So be sure to visit and maybe purchase something if you're in the mood. It really does help me a lot. Also remember that you can find this vlog on podcast form. Just look up Talks from Freaking Narnia on all your favorite podcast distribution platforms. I have about 30 episodes already uploaded, and it's a work in progress to keep uploading more, so stay tuned for that. If, however, you would like to have this video in podcast form on the exact same day it goes up, or maybe a day later when I forget, sorry. If you want to have it as soon as possible on podcast form, then you want to subscribe to my Patreon page, because for $1 a month you can absolutely positively get this podcast on the day it goes up on YouTube. So be sure to check that out. There are also other rewards, so maybe check it out and try it. You can find it at patreon.com/FreakingNarnia. Any bit of support is great, guys. So yep, I think that's about it for me today. I will see you guys next week with another video from all the way in freaking Narnia. Bye bye. They teach you. It was such, not quite the same with Joe and Laurie, but Winona Ryder. And also remember that you can find this, if you'd like to get